two huge NFL games. We've got the Broncos and the Bills in action, and we've also got the Panthers going up against the Green Bay Packers. But that's not all. Sports NFL. Jeff, completely, man. An absolute pleasure to have you on as a guest. How's it going?
It's my pleasure, fellas. This is like being in an episode of Boondock Saints with these accents, man. I can't. That's my favorite movie of all time. So this is really pretty cool.
Oh man, seriously, it's been well, obviously, I apologize for my accent because my wife can't understand me half the time. So hopefully we'll get there. But just before we start, we are brought to you by our friends over at Pundit Arena. Now, Jeff, me and Colin spoke to you in March or April this year. I can't remember what month it was, but at that time you were sitting living it up in Hawaii, sitting in the back of the car, chilling out, man. Did you really think at that point that you would be sitting in London come Christmas? Because I think we were just so pessimistic that the season would even happen at that point. But I guess it's all worked out, hasn't it now? Because you're obviously back over in the UK again.
Yeah, I mean, it was really crazy times because that's normally the time of year that we're just about ready to go back and get ramped up for our preseason and training camp and all of that. And the COVID bombshell hit, and we ended up losing our entire season because of it. And our games were supposed to start at the end of June, and there was just no way that the Canadian government was going to let that happen. And I think probably the right decision for them at that time. The NFL had a few months more to get out ahead of it, and when you consider, guys, the amount of money that's involved, um, and just how deeply rooted the National Football League is in the culture of America, and how important those Sundays are to the human beings, all of us around the world that really love the game. I salute the NFL on with one hand and say, what an amazing job they did to get this thing. It is, we're still not out of the woods yet, but to get it this far along has been phenomenal because it's an incredible, absolutely incredible amount of work and money that's gone into it. I have a friend that works for the Jets, and he was talking to the COVID doctor, the overarching big medical guy, and that they were administering 44,000 COVID tests a week in the National Football League. I mean, you think about that. That's just in the National Football League. They spent $160 million on protocols. I mean, they have done everything they can to make this happen, and all of us around the world that love the game are happy for it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It definitely makes for a Sunday, because so much else has changed and all our routines have changed. So the fact that the games take place, it's really something to look forward to, and it gives us something to talk about, which is a wonderful distraction. Now I think, Brian, did you we were talking, I suppose, Jeff, ourselves, obviously, about the protocols and about the possibility of a bubble. And I think, Brian, you were saying, was there something that the commissioner mentioned during the week?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that it was kind of a given that we were going to see a bubble come the playoffs. But during the week, Adele at the meeting said he wasn't going to make it mandatory. He was going to leave it up to each team to make that decision if they want to go into a bubble come the playoffs. And then, having dug deeper into it, it seems that his hands are tied, because if he did insist on a bubble, the NFLPA were going to look for some financial compensation for the players for sacrificing their time in terms of going into a bubble. So he's decided to kind of leave it alone, let the teams work out themselves what the right approach is. It'd be interesting to see who actually decides to go with a bubble, because, we always talk about the sacrifices that the players make, but, do they want to do an ultimate sacrifice in terms of locking themselves away for one final month of the season away from their families in order to get to the Super Bowl? So I think we'll quickly say who really wants it more so than others, by the nature of who goes into the bubble and who doesn't.
I agree with Brian, and this is interesting, Brian. Sean Payton has been pounding on the desk for this for a long time. He really, they went away. They basically were in their own bubble during training camp, and then he's been pushing the NFL to go this way throughout the season. I think you hit on exactly what the biggest issue is. When you do anything with the players, and I mean anything with the players, it has to be okayed by the Players Association. And the Players Association, first and foremost, is going to look after their health. Secondly, they're going to look after their financial situations. And to ask those guys to be in a separate environment, you knew that was gonna be a problematic issue. So I think he handled it probably the diplomatic way, and he put it back on the organizations. Now, Peyton may have that kind of juice with his own football team that they'll voluntarily do it, but they're not going to be able to require that a player goes into the bubble.
Jeff, if you were talking about the Boondock Saints, first of all, I want to audition for Sean Patrick Flannery's role. We'll give Billy Connolly's role to Michael, I think, or something like that. But just in terms of the games itself, like we're 15 weeks into the season now. We've got basically through the season. I mean, even if a massive COVID break happened now, we will still have playoffs. We will still have a Super Bowl. Totally agree. There's too much money at stake. But in terms of the play on the field, like, we started with offensive explosions, like just points galore, probably because of the lack of training camps, lack of cohesion on defense. And we've seen a little bit of inconsistency now in home field advantage because you don't have the big crowds. You don't have the disruption on third down for away sides. Is there any kind of big theme or kind of pattern you've seen with your eyes from a coaching perspective that have been different this year in the new COVID world that really hasn't been seen in seasons gone?
Well, Mark, that's really a great observation, because, this is how the whole thing has been turned on its head. The typical coach's cliche or coach speak was the defenses are always ahead of the offenses coming out of training camp or in preseason. But it was completely opposite this year. The defenses looked like they hadn't even practiced, some of them, and the offenses ran roughshod over people. And then it's kind of balanced itself out now a little bit, but the home field advantage, think about, like, you've got that San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge behind you, and think about that team. They don't even have a home right now. I mean, San Jose has said they can't play the games in Santa Clara, and so they are down playing their games in Arizona. I mean, that's got to be really difficult. Teams like Green Bay, like Cleveland, like Buffalo, like New Orleans, those are places where it's really typically hard to play because of the noise, because of the crowd or the weather or whatever it is. All of that's kind of been mitigated. And what I think we're seeing, maybe because of that, is maybe a pure view of who's really good and who's not good. Because when I worked for Coach Vermeil in 2001 in training camp in Kansas City, he told the team that home field is worth 3 points in the NFL. All right, so when we were going to play what was then called the Redskins, it was a 3-point. We viewed it as if we were up 3 to start the game. Right, when we went on the road, we were 3 points behind when they kicked the ball off. That's the mentality that there was. I don't think that exists now anymore, and I think that's one of the things that we've seen, and I've seen a trend. I think that we can probably thank Kansas City for, that more and more and more young players. Used to be it took a receiver typically 2 or 3 years to really get to play well in National Football League because the coverages are so much more involved. They never see press man in college football very much. But these young receivers that can run the way these guys can run, and offensive coordinators have figured out that you got to think more about players and less about plays. And so you see the kind of things like KJ Hamler, who, was a good college player at Penn State, but wasn't like a dynamic guy. I mean, he had dynamic skills, but they weren't on exhibit very much. Jerry Jeudy comes in, lights it up. Ruggs comes in, lights it up. We're seeing Jalen Reagor in Philadelphia show why they drafted him high. Justin Jefferson probably going to be the rookie of the year, or is in the, will be in the final running for it. So they're all over the place. And these are guys that are all right out of college. I mean, with no training camp and no preseason. So I think that's kind of a cool little trend that's happening in the league right now too.
Just been a crazy season and a crazy off season as well, Jeff. And who has been, or what team for you has been the standout so far? I know Kansas City are sitting 12-1 now, boys. But Jeff, what team has surprised you going into the season now, sitting week 15?
Well, I think there's a couple that surprised me that, kind of in different ways. I would have never guessed that we would be sitting here today at this point in the season, and the Cowboys have won 4 games. I just, their roster was so talented. Now, again, I understand that there was changeover in the staff and all of that, but their defense doesn't seem to get better. Discount the Cincinnati game because Cincinnati's crippled up, but their defense just doesn't seem to get better week after week. They lost Dak. They lost all those offensive linemen. Zeke, to me, has been a real disappointment. He looks, I wouldn't say disinterested, but he looks heavy. He doesn't look like he's got his quickness. I think Pollard's the best back that they've got right now. They've got those 3 fantastic receivers, and, they really haven't impacted the game like you would think they had. There've been coaching decisions that are highly questionable. It's been a mess in Dallas. On the other hand, I thought Miami would take a step, but I didn't know if they'd get to be what they are right now. And I think that's a place that's trending really in the right direction. Buffalo, I thought, would win the AFC East. But again, they look very strong to me. That's a team that I think would go toe-to-toe with Kansas City. The Packers kind of bounced back a little bit. They're going to have a chance because that guy playing quarterback for them is so special. San Francisco decimated by injuries, and all of a sudden they're just an average team. The Rams bounce back. Seattle somehow finds a way to win 9 or 10 games every year with a bad defense. I mean, there's so many storylines in this season. It's really amazing. So it's going to be a battle down to the end. I know Kansas City to me is a clear-cut favorite to win it, but they're not without their problems too.
Jeff, just to kind of touch on something you talked about, the rookies and in the wide receivers who have been outstanding. I think Jefferson has been, one of my favorite players to watch in the league this season. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the rookie QB class. Obviously, look, Burrow had the terrible injury, but Justin Herbert has come in and has, looked fantastic, and obviously Tua in Miami, and now Jalen Hurts in Philly. What are your thoughts, I suppose, on the QB situation with the rookies this year?
Well, I think it's been really interesting the last couple years because there was a time not very long ago, guys, probably 5, 6 years ago, where everybody was concerned, there was concern about the fact that the quarterback group was getting older. Brady was getting older, Breeze was getting older, Rivers was getting older, and there was really kind of a void after them. Well, then all of a sudden, it's like they fell off the trees. I mean, it's like they're all over the place. And I think Patrick Mahomes has done more for the position in terms of he's doing things now regularly that you coached against in the past. I mean, you would never have a guy throw the ball across his body across the field. You know, no look passes. The one I'm waiting for is when he goes behind his back with one. That's the one I want to see. But I think what coaches have found is you don't want to take a guy and screw him into a make a square peg in a round hole. You let whatever your guy can do, you feature what he can do, and then build your offense around what he can do. You surround him with talent and playmakers, and then let him go. And the teams that have done that, the Bills are a perfect example. Josh Allen, guys, was never a 60% completion passer as a college player, a junior college player, a high school player. And Brian Dable, they went through the process of teaching him how to be a pro, but they also went out and they got Cole Beasley, and then they got John Brown, and then they got Stephon Diggs, and they got good young tight ends, and they got Singletary at running. All of a sudden, this guy doesn't have to be perfect with everything, and because he's got so many playmakers around. And I think that's what you're starting to see is people realize that whatever your guy can do, let him do it, and then work around his skill set. The Rams do an excellent job with Jared Goff, because if you look at Jared Goff, and if you're evaluating Jared Goff, he's not a threat to run with the ball. So the RPO game, all that stuff, don't worry about it, right? But yet they still do a good enough job off of what their base offense is, getting him on the perimeter, changing the long launch points for him, using play action, and getting the ball to those receivers. Where he struggles is, and this is my concern if I was a Rams fan, can he win a game for me when we got to come back from 2 scores in the second half? I don't know that, right? I don't know that. Aaron Rodgers can do that. We've seen that Patrick Mahomes can do that. Matthew Stafford can do that. Those more classic throwers, but that doesn't mean they can't win with him. They've been to a Super Bowl with him. Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. So you just got to try and, look at it holistically and fit around that guy, fit around what he does. Did you see Mariota last night? It looked like, and I'm a big Marcus fan, but I remember him at the end at Tennessee, and it was like all the life had got sucked out of him, right? Because he was trying to fit into a system. He was trying to, they didn't have much around him, and all of a sudden he goes to the Raiders, and the Raiders are running RPOs, they're running quarterback runs. I mean, John did a great job of having an offense ready if he had to go to Mariota. But Mariota's the best backup they could get their hands on. So what do? Take a guy that can't play just because, he's kind of more fitted to what your starter looks like? That's a recipe for disaster.
Just on Mariota, I kind of look at that one as similar to the way Tannehill came in initially as the backup at the Titans. And obviously, as you said, Mariota's time was coming to an end. He wasn't playing well. They brought in Tannehill, and you look where they are now. And I always felt that where Mariota went, he could see something similar. Now, he's going to play the last 2 games because of the injury, but he did look re-energized in the game last night. He didn't look like the quarterback of old. And I just wonder, will he get an opportunity somewhere else?
Well, I think that speaks to another issue about, when you look at what's going on in Philadelphia. Here comes Hurts, and all of a sudden, and they weren't great. I mean, New Orleans didn't play very well, and they turned it over inside their 50 twice. And, there's some things that they didn't do well. But Jalen Hurts brought some juice to that offense, right? Now, if we say that the starter's broken, what do? Do they keep that big contract and, hope he fixes himself or gets right? Or do you let him go and maybe he's the next Mariota, Tannehill guy that, sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need to just be able to step back, see the game a little bit better, not have the pressure of being a starter, let your body heal. Because all of those guys, Carson Wentz is beaten up. Beaten up. Marcus Mariota was beaten up physically. Tannehill, beaten up physically when he was in Miami. So all of those guys have the physical abilities or they wouldn't have been drafted where they were drafted. So does a change of, that's saying sometimes a change is as good as a rest, Does a change of scenery help those guys? Is Josh Rosen, redeemable? We'll see, maybe. Who knows? I liked him coming out of college. I thought he was better than Darnold. And Darnold's another one. He's real young. He's 23. He was the youngest player in his draft class. And he's played for a horrible football team in a tough environment. Maybe he just needs to go away and be a backup for a couple of years and then see if he can do it again.
See, Jeff, I think the Bills were ahead of the game on this. Oh, sorry, not the Bills, the Bears. They're just breaking their starter, then breaking the backup, then going back to the starter. It's part of the evolution.
The problem, Mark, is the Bears have been doing that for 25 years and they haven't found the guy yet.
I remember having a conversation with a Bears fan one time and pointing out just how amazing their defenses have been over the years. And they kind of looked at me quizzically and I said, you got Rex Grossman to a Super Bowl. That's a pretty impressive achievement for any defense.
You don't need to say any more than that right there.
So Jeff, this is actually one of the first times I felt really gutted. About COVID in the last little while, because I really feel we should be having this discussion in a good Irish pub over several hours, over lots and lots of beers, because some of the stuff you've just brought up there, like Pat Mahomes throwing the ball across his body, we did used to see that. Brett Favre used to do that in a Vikings jersey, direct to a Saint in a playoff game. But
yeah.
Pat might be a bit more successful. Brian DeBall, ex-Patriots, ex-Chiefs and stuff like that, next head coach next year, I think is amazing. But again, trying to bring things, I want to ask you two questions really. One related to the season and one related to your experience when we see you like on Sundays, especially in playoff time on Sky Sports, right? This season has had some amazing plays. We've had CeeDee Lamb, for example, a few weeks ago. And then last week, whether it was Xavier Howard, whether it was Kenny Moore of the Colts, just unbelievable athletic achievements. I think I said there are moments when you realize you're just human and they're not fundamentally. I just wonder your thoughts on what's your favorite or greatest play of the year so far? And then on the Sky side, again, we were talking just amongst ourselves, some of the fun things we've seen on that. What's been your greatest memory on Sky Sports? And you can't pick Scott Hansen nearly killing everybody.
No. Actually, you know what? I would say that my favorite experience at Sky would be one that lasted, I guess it was probably 5 years. And that was having a chance to work with Kevin Cato. He's a special guy. He was a special guy and not a football guy. He was a basketball guy. Kevin was a basketball coach, but beyond all things, Kevin was a great human being. And that came across on the screen. And I think we all really, who love the game, and particularly who love the game over here, we all are deeply indebted to Kevin because for a long, long time, he was the face of the NFL in the UK and in Ireland and all over the place. And he was a guy that, I was around him in a lot of different situations, and I never once saw him handle himself, in any other way than as a gentleman and as a professional. Always had time for people, always had time to talk to somebody, never, even times when he's tired and it was after a broadcast and one of the security guards wants to talk about it, he always, always, always found time for people. And I think that's a tremendous, there's not enough people like that. This year, plays of the year, my God, there's so many that just are, just incredible. You mentioned that one-handed interception last week. That's a freaky one. There was a pass I was watching today, and I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was the tight end from Washington, because I'm doing some research on Washington. Catches a ball with his fingers about 3 inches off the ground with one hand. I mean, these guys are so phenomenal. It really is, Mark. They make the game that's a hard game to play, they make it look easy, right? I mean, and that's I think anytime an athlete does that, has that kind of skill, whatever his sport is, then he's transcending, the sport. And there have been some transcendent moments certainly this year in the league, and goofy ones too, like the onside. Atlanta's letting the ball against the Cowboys, and let the ball spin. I mean, just crazy stuff. But it's been a crazy year, so I don't know if I could come up with one particular one that I'd say, yeah, that's the one that we'll always remember that season for that play.
Jeff, can I just ask you, being a Giants fan, and I get a terrible time off these guys. We are in an opportunity of winning the division, mainly because this year just hasn't been a good year for the NFC East. But taking away the record, I look at the Giants now, and I look at the Giants over the past few years, and it's completely changed. Joe Judge seems to be implementing a new culture there. He was a bit of an unknown. Mark knew well of him because obviously Mark's a Pats fan, but by and large, most fans didn't really know who he was coming in. And from day one, and when he did his press conference, he just seemed to hit the ground running, and everything he does seems to be impressive. And I joke, whilst we're not good now, I think in the long term, I think we're definitely going in the right direction.
I'll tell you what, I think it was the last time the Patriots were in the Super Bowl. I met him because the media day thing is a circus, right? And then every day after that, they have the team and the big stars are up on the risers, and then they got tables spread all over the place, and the coaches and the players that aren't on the risers just sit there, and then the media kind of moves around, and it's like a buffet. You just take a little of this and take a little of that, right? And so, as always is the case, the special teams coach, very, very few people they don't even know who he is, right? Most of the time. And Joe was a young special teams coach. So I went over and I just sat down with him, and we had about a 25-minute conversation, not an interview, just a conversation, just two guys talking ball. And I remember coming away from that saying to Neil that that I met Joe Judge and and his background, his coaching background is really kind of unique. And I said, that dude is wired tight. And I mean, wired tight. And then I saw his press conference last year, and I thought, oh my God. I mean, and then a friend of mine, Thomas McGahee,
special teams coach.
Yeah, he works for him. And Thomas and I are good friends. And so I had Thomas on my little coffee with the coach thing I did during the off season. We talked about the Giants and Joe, and once we got off air, I said, all right, Thomas, tell me the real deal. How is he? And he said, he is a star, is the way he described him. He said, he is a star. I'm telling you, he has it. And, Thomas has worked for some pretty good football coaches. And so that's pretty high praise. And then when I watched his team, it was really interesting because when you do it the way he's doing it, it's a risk and it's a gamble, because if you don't win and you're as hard as he is, and you're as demanding as he is, and that didn't work for Patricia, but it's worked for him for two reasons, I think. Number one, it's what the Giants really needed, right? And number two, he was so consistent with it, because if there's a crack in it, if you're a tough guy like that and you got tough practices and, you heard the stories about the coaches running laps if the player screwed up and all that stuff. If there gets to be even a little crack in it, then you can have a revolt on your hands real fast if you're not winning.
Is that why he handled the Golden Tate situation very quickly when he came out and had a bit of a social media meltdown with his wife over the fact against the Buccaneers on Monday night? He didn't get any balls thrown his way until very late in the game, and he started coming up to the camera. He quickly dealt with that. You're not playing next week.
Yeah, well, that's what he's done. He's been very consistent with the way he runs things, and credit to Gettleman and all the guys above him for letting him do it his way, right? Because a lot of times, and this has been problematic in Washington for years, coaches would try and hold players to a standard, and then the players would go above the coach to get relief. And then once that happens, once you allow that to happen one time, then the coach loses the credibility in the locker room. So everybody's got to be on the same page, and everybody's got to be functioning the same way. He has that right now in New York. I mean, he got rid of Mark Colombo, and Mark Colombo's a good young line coach. But Mark Colombo, that just wasn't going to work, and he wasn't going to have a guy. I mean, and that's a risky move when you make that move.
It's very risky when he's 6'8" and you're telling him he's no longer got a job.
And on top of it, you got to replace him. You got to coach those guys. And Joe took it over for a while, but what I'm saying is that his toughness is what he lives. It's how he is, right? And so there's an old Buddhist tenet that I really believe in, and it goes, embody what you teach and then teach only what you embody. And when you can be that guy if you're that guy to everybody and in all situations, right? And I think the Giants are really trending in the right direction.
Let's see what happens over the next 18 to 24 months. Hopefully all our teams, apart from Mark's, can trend in the right direction. Let's jump on these 2 Saturday games. I think it's almost like a bonus now. There's so many games on Sky this weekend, Jeff. What we usually do is we'll look at one matchup and we'll look at one team in detail, the other team in detail, and then we'll give a quick pick in that sense. Let's focus on the Buffalo Bills first, Jeff. We'll start with yourself. Now, Jeff, these boys have been laughing at me for the last 6 weeks. I keep saying they're going to win the AFC. They're going to go to the Super Bowl. Your man Cole Beasley is having one hell of a season. You must be very proud of him. But this Bills team is for real, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've been for real for a couple of years. They're not without flaws. There are a couple things I think that they've got to continue to work to get better at. But again, Brian Dable has taken a wild horse and tamed him. And when I say tamed him, I'm not saying that he made him rideable, right? Where before he was just a buck and bronco. He was all over the place. And that's not easy to do. If you talk to quarterback coaches, one of the things they say is the hardest thing to get a quarterback to be, if he's not, is accurate. And part of it is because of his decision-making has improved. He's a much more accurate passer than he was when he first came into the league. Having guys like Brown and Beasley and Diggs, who are all guys that they brought there for him, is a big, big plus. They've rebuilt an offensive line that was really bad not too many years ago. When they went in there, and this should be really, everybody looks at. I'm gonna go on a rant here for a minute, but right now they're going to be new head coaches and new general managers and all that in the league, right? And so the NFL is a copycat league. All professional sports are basically, but the NFL in particular. And so when the Patriots are having their run, how many expatriate or assistant coaches got head jobs in the league? Because everybody wanted what? They wanted a little bit of that Patriot stuff. And then it was Sean McVay was this young, dynamic, offensive guy, and everybody. And the joke in the coaching industry was, if you had lunch with Sean McVay sometime in the last 5 years, you could probably get an interview in the NFL. But the team, to me, where they ought to look, like if I'm Detroit, I'm looking at Buffalo and saying, okay, how did you clean up what was a mess? I mean, a mess 6 years ago. And now you're the AFC East champion, right? How did you do that? What was it? Well, if you studied it, you'd find out that it really came down to a couple things. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are tied at the hip. They know what they want. They know exactly the kind of profile of the people they want to have in the building. And I didn't say players. I said the kind of people they want in that building. That's coaches, players, equipment guys, trainers, doctors, everybody, right? And then they went out and did it. And they had the courage to go out and get rid of, quote, star players, right? They got rid of guys that were their best players because they didn't, almost in every single case, they weren't the kind of people that they wanted. And then they build it based on people. I'll tell you about when Beasley was in free agency. Now, I had not coached Cole in 8 years, right? 8 years. I got 3 different phone conversations from their personnel office checking on him. And I hadn't coached him in 8 years, right? That's how thorough they were when they were looking at free agents, right? They asked me about what he was like in college. They asked me about, did he ever, all that stuff. And then they asked me about his rookie year. He was a free agent with the Cowboys and left training camp, right? And they wanted to know about that. And I mean, that's how deep they dug, because they didn't want to make a mistake. And they wanted to make sure that he was going to be what they needed, which was all that physical stuff that you see with the great short burst quickness and hands and amazing ability to get first downs and all that. But they also wanted to make sure he could fit in their locker room and he could fit in their community. And, there aren't enough teams that build it that way. So that's to me the biggest thing.
Colin, are you very much on the Bills bandwagon, forgetting who they're playing today?
I don't know if I'm on their bandwagon, because again, I still think they've got a couple issues. They're a little soft in the middle in defense, right? Like, to me, when you look at them, you say, yeah, I think you can run the ball on them a little bit, right? Their offensive line is a work in progress still. They're still not where they need to be, I think, to be an elite team with offensive and defensive linemen. But, Milano's a great cover linebacker. Tre'Davious White's one of the better corners in the league. Jerry Hughes still can rush the passer. Epinesa is going to be a good football player one day. Ed Oliver makes plays. So, they've got players. But I don't know if they have enough players yet to overtake the Chiefs. But I think that's what's in their sights.
And I could imagine, Jeff, that they'll get there, given the plan that they executed with Josh Allen. And I suppose, being a Broncos fan, watching what they did with Allen, and a lot of people talk about Drew Lock and can Drew Lock do it. But to me, the difference, they brought in a new OC. I think judging on what you were saying, like, they identified Allen. They traded up to get Allen. They knew he was who they wanted, right? They wanted the physical talents that he had to play in Buffalo, and that they built around him. And they brought in not just the weapons, but the experience. And I think, to me, that's where I see a big difference between what the Broncos did with Drew Lock and what the Bills have done with Josh Allen, because the Broncos, they allowed Lock to kind of fall into their lap. It's not like they actively pursued him. Flacco was there, and we were told Flacco was elite, and then that didn't work out. But the Bills really invested in him. And while the Broncos have given Drew Lock weapons, and really good weapons, I mean, I think Hamler has been outstanding. He's a really tough kid. They haven't given the experience. There's not the experience. There's not a slot guy like Cole Beasley. There's not the experience on the O-line. So to me, I think the Bills have done a phenomenal job in terms of really building there. And you can see because it's not just about consistency. I hear a lot of talk in the league about it's got to be the right sort of consistency. And going off what you said, Jeff, they really knew who they were bringing in, both in terms of coaches, players, and staff. And that's why the consistency has worked, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys that they brought in had some sort of tie to McDermott or to Bean or somebody, right? They knew they really wanted to make sure they knew what they were getting. Interesting you talk about Locke because he's a very controversial figure in Denver in this media talk shows and all that. One of my ex-players has the most highly rated Broncos talk show in Denver, and it's a constant source of conversation. And when they get Cortland Sutton back, they're going to have as good a receiving core as you could expect to have. And I just don't know. I don't know if Josh Allen's, and this would be an interesting thing to ask somebody who was like a sports psychologist, is Locke's personality and his makeup, his mental and emotional makeup like Josh Allen's, or is it different? I'm going to tell you guys a story. It's fascinating to me. There's a guy named, and you can Google him. I think it's Jonathan Neednagel, and he studies like people's brains, right? And when June Jones was working for the Chargers, they had the first pick in the draft, and they were looking at quarterbacks. And I think it was Ryan Leaf and Manning, I think, were the two that they were looking at. And when you looked at him physically, Leaf was the better guy. He's bigger, stronger, faster, bigger arm, faster delivery, all of it, better athlete, all of it. And they were making a decision about who they were going to take. And the general manager, Bobby Beathard, wanted Ryan Leaf because he was a better athlete and, bigger arm and all that stuff. And Neednagel says, do not take that guy. And lo and behold, that's the way it worked. And he's worked for a number of pro teams on brain typing, draft choices. And that's the part. See, that's why I don't care about the combine, because the combine is, like, to me, just an entertainment piece. It's a circus act. Who can jump the highest, who can run the fast. Christ, you can find that out anytime. And it takes absolutely no, that's just information gathering, right? It's a made for television event. That's what it's become. What I want to know is, how's that guy going to react when he is in the spotlight of playing quarterback in the National Football League? Trent Dilfer told me, he said, they just don't know the enormity of the task. And it's not just the football learning and the speed and, all the other stuff you got to deal with, the football. He said it's all of it. He said it's an all-encompassing, gigantic thing, and you can't know it until you get there. And some guys, it's just too much for. And when I watched Locke play, that's his body language. Again, I believe really a lot in body language. And Locke's body language always seems to me like he'd be the guy that when you try and coach him, he goes, "Yeah, I got it, coach. I got you. Right? Instead of being the guy that says, "Okay, all right, I'll work at it." Or, that to me is when you see Josh Allen, he wants to be coached. He wants to get better, right? And that's a big part of being good, is wanting to be coached, having a desire to be coached.
Just on the Bills, just a quick point. Do you think it helped them by the fact that they're kind of floating under the radar because the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and then you had the Steelers going beaten for so long that I wouldn't say nobody was talking about the Bills, but they've certainly kind of been below those two for a certain extent of the season. And I would have thought there would have been much more discussed about the fact that it's the first AFC East divisional winner for, was it 10, 15 years? But they just seem to be, that conversation has quickly moved on to, could they get the number 2 seed now, because the Steelers are having a bit of a wobble.
Brian, see, you're nibbling away at an issue that's part of being in Buffalo, right? Because if you go to Buffalo, you're going to be off the radar. you're going to be out of the radar screen, no matter how successful you are. And one of the things that they want to make sure of in Buffalo is that you can handle living in Buffalo, not just the weather, but you're going to, it's like Green Bay. There's no nightlife. There's no, I mean, you go to Toronto, 2 hours up the road if you want nightlife, but that's a, you know, Marshawn Lynch was in Buffalo and was just a good back, not a great back, right? He just didn't fit there. And so that's one of the things that's all part of how big this whole personnel thing is.
Yeah.
You know, Buffalo's never going to be a destination free agents place, right? They're going to have to overpay to get guys to go there unless the guy, for whatever reason, likes that lifestyle. On the other hand, you're going to have guys falling all over each other to get to New York and Miami and, you know, some of those places. So it really comes down to just finding guys that fit your place and what you want to get done.
So, Jeff, I mean, I feel like incumbent on me to mention that the Big Ten Championship is later today. You know, Ohio State and Mr. Fields, who'll go high in the draft, they're going to be playing. I feel it's incumbent to mention it because it's like we're missing an actual NFL game this evening because this game isn't really going to be competitive, in my view. I'm not just saying that to wind up my Broncos friends on this, but I searched long and hard to find something the Broncos were number one at. And I found something. They're actually number one in red zone defense in terms of touchdown percentage. The problem is Josh Allen has never, ever thrown a pick in the red zone, has 35 touchdowns passing, 0 interceptions, and he's run for 22 rushing touchdowns during that time frame as well. So, guys, the one thing you've got going for you here, it's not really going to work. But Jeff, what I want to get your thoughts on is, I mean, if I was being really mean, I would actually say about, you know, the Bills compared to the Broncos. The Broncos, they don't have an owner, they don't have a quarterback, and arguably they don't have someone who's good enough to be a head coach. Because in my mind, Vic Fangio more in a great coordinator, but maybe can't take that step up on the head coach. You know, I won't press you on the owner piece, but we actually had a conversation before about there's a lot of fantastic coordinators. Yes, half of Bill Belichick's coaching tree who are great coordinators, but can't make that leap to the head coach. And yes, Patricia, Bill O'Brien, I'll take my licks on this, guys. What is that difference? I mean, you mentioned about Joe Judge, but what is that thing that kind of is the differentiator, which turns someone who's obviously clearly a great coach, but just can't be that head man?
Well, I think that's a big question, but the biggest thing to me, and I was one of those guys, right? And when I got my opportunity, I was somewhere in my 30s, and probably before I was ready, right? Looking back on it now, looking at it with no emotion and the whole deal. And then I didn't have, and this is nobody's fault, it's just the way the situation worked. I didn't have veterans around. We didn't have a general manager. So, you know, when you're doing it for the first time, it's the same deal. You can, when you're a position coach, you got 12 guys you're responsible for. When you're a coordinator, you got 30 guys you're responsible for. When you're a head coach, you've got everybody you're responsible for. Everybody and everybody's decisions and everybody's performance and all of it. And that's a gigantic step up. And then if you don't have an environment where you can kind of, I won't say fail, but you can make a mistake or two and you know, you can live through it, right? So I think when you get that chance, and the problem is you don't get to pick when you get that chance, right? And if you don't take that chance when you get it, you may never get it. Like Vic has been a fantastic coordinator in the NFL for 30 years, and never, I mean, he probably interviewed before for a couple of jobs, but never got a chance. And so when the Bronco job comes open, you don't got a quarterback. There's a lot of problems in Denver, right? well, what are you going to do? Sit in Chicago and be a coordinator at Vic's in his late 50s, and then it may be the only time the phone ever rings for you to do it. So you got to go do it. Now, for him, it's been tough because, you know, part of it is the expectation level in Denver is so high because everybody still remembers, you know, Shanahan and the Super Bowls and Elway and, you know, and so you're always measured against that, right? Where if you're at a place like Detroit, hey, if you have a winning season, they'll probably cast Stefanski in bronze and put him outside in front of the stadium in this offseason. I mean, in Cleveland. So, I mean, it's different level of expectations when you go into those places, right? And, you know, then he under pressure fires his coordinator after the first year. See, all of those things are things that tell me that the ship's not very stable, right? And I don't want anybody to fail. I don't, because I've been there and I know what it feels like. And I know that sometimes if you fail, it may be the only chance you ever get. And that's not feeling sorry for anybody. It's just the way the business works. So, you know, guys have to be themselves. Guys have to be in the right situation. Guys have to have the right support. Guys have to have talent around them. And then you better be able to bring in your guys, the guys that you want to help you, because let me tell you something, fellas, the backdoor politics and the backstabbing and the kingdom building and all that other stuff that is endemic and creates problems in big business or politics, or it's all the same in the NFL. You know, there's only 32 of those jobs in the world, 32, and they pay really well. And so guys, I'm telling you, guys stab each other in the back, and I mean, it's amazing. I'm going to write a book one day, and I won't say it's going to be a bestseller, but there'll be a lot of things that in there about, you know, what happens in a situation like New York right now with the Jets, where I'm sure the assistant coaches' doors are getting pulled shut and guys are on the phone calling their buddies and, hey, you know, can you support me about it? You got any jobs going to be open? All the stuff that takes away from the only thing that they should be concentrating on now, and that's winning football games. But that's human nature. That's survival, you know?
Well, it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason in Denver, and I think that's a whole different podcast / series, Colin. Really quickly, lads, let's make our picks before we look at the Green Bay Carolina game really quickly. I'm going to go, well, my heart says 50 Brandon McManus field goals because that's all we can do. My head says Buffalo by 14, to be honest with you. Jeff, just starting with you, man. Who's going to win the game tonight?
I think Buffalo will win, but I think it's going to be a close game. Denver can play defense, you know, and this is a perfect trap game for Denver because Buffalo's won twice. They just came off of a huge win on national television. Everybody's telling them how good they are. Everybody's telling them this. Right now, I told my wife this today. I said, you know, if I was a head coach at a place like Buffalo today, I would make sure that every player got a present wrapped in his locker room, locked in his locker when he came in to the office today with a sign on the top says, do not open until team meeting, right? Then they all had to bring them to the team meeting. And inside their box would be a pair of earmuffs and a set of blinders. And that's what they need to put on. Earmuffs and keep all the noise out, and blinders and just stay focused on what you can control. And that's Denver this week. Because if they start looking ahead of themselves and they start scoreboard watching and all that other stuff, Denver will rise up and beat them. But I think it's going to be Buffalo by about 3.
Oh, Colin.
Yeah, Jeff, I love your idea. I really do. It sounds something like Alex Ferguson famously had an envelope at the beginning of a season, and he said he had 3 names in the envelope of 3 players that he knew were going to leave him down during the season. And he never revealed to the team who it was. And everyone spent the entire season going, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me. And at the end of the season, he opened the envelope. There were no names in it.
Is that right? Is that a true story?
That's a true story. That
guy was a genius, man.
Yeah, that's what Fergie did. And I think that building on what you said earlier, that mental side of the game is so important. That intangible, that making the jump from the college game where you have the physical traits. I think that and that's the part we don't see, and that's the part as fans a lot of the time we don't know what goes on in the background and the training and etc. etc. So to me, I think the Bills look, it's difficult to see beyond them in this game. I think it's a good game for them actually to test themselves against another solid defense. I think Vic Fangio's defense will make it tough, but I see the Bills winning this one. Probably there won't be. I can't imagine there's more than a touchdown in it though.
Ryan?
I'm going to go completely against the trend so far, because when they played at home to the Chargers, we felt that could be a trap game. When they went to the desert against the 49ers, when the game got moved to Arizona, we thought maybe that could be a trap game. They've overcome those 2 games. The only game they've lost in the last 7 was the Hail Murray, the Hail Mary at the end throw. So they could have been easily have won the last 7 games. So I think McDermott's got that nature of worrying about particular trap games out of the system within the team. I actually think they'll win comfortably. I don't see it being close. I think they'll win. When I say comfortably, 2 touchdown win for the Bills.
Mark?
Guys, I mentioned I like maths earlier on. Like, this isn't Fermat's last theorem. We don't have to do astrophysical equations here. It's a very simple mathematical formula. Josh Allen is greater than Drew Lock, plus Sean McDermott is greater than Vic Fangio, equals Bills comfortable win. They lock up their first AFC East title in 25 years. And given they've already given up 2 Hail Marys, maybe they go out in the playoffs to another Hail Mary. In the end.
Oh, here. Well, obviously Colin's talking about Fergie there and about Man United. I mean, it's Leeds against United on Sunday. We know Jeff's a big Leeds fan. So
be careful now! Don't you dare cast anything on my wife.
Here, I'll say Nohan. I'm a big Manchester fan, so I'm going to say Nohan, man. Let's really quickly for the final segment of the show. Let's focus on this last game, the game at 1:15 a.m. Jeff, I'm presuming that you're in the studio for that live, yeah?
Yep.
Lovely. Well, what's your thoughts ahead of this? Because the Green Bay Packers are sitting the same as the Bills, 10-3 going into this. Obviously, a big contender in the NFC. Who have you got winning this game? And what's your thoughts on both teams, Jeff?
Well, the Packers to me are the team that, if I was going to take any NFC team that has a chance to beat the Chiefs, I'd say the Packers would be the first one I'd talk about. Because here's the thing about the Chiefs. I did a study on the Chiefs for the last 3 years. So it's basically during the Mahomes era, right? And they've scored 30 points or more about 3/4 of the games. I got the exact numbers. I just don't have them at hand right now. So that tells me that if you're going to beat them, you're going to have to score when you get your chances, which means your quarterback's going to have to make a couple throws to beat them. When you watch the Raiders get them early in the year, you saw that very thing happen. They got
40
points against Sorensen one-on-one, and that's not a fair fight. And so they hit a couple long touchdown passes that actually won the game for them. Kansas City is a team that if you're going to beat them, you got to be able to say, we're going to get 30 points today, right? And then you got to hope that they have an off day, right? So I think Green Bay, we're talking about Green Bay, I know, but that's what I'm saying about Green Bay. I look at Green Bay as a team that can do that because it all starts, and Mark made a good point about the quarterbacks. It all starts in the game today with the quarterback position. And, for my money anyway, I would still take Aaron Rodgers. If there was one drive at the end of a game to win it, I would still take Aaron Rodgers. If all the other talent on the field was the same, I just think he's made Robert Tannen not an elite tight end, but certainly a much better tight end than his physical tools say he should be. Every week he goes out there, and you think defensive coordinators all of a sudden just forget about Devontae Adams when they play the Packers? I mean, that guy gets doubled. They do everything in the world to try and take him away, and Rodgers always finds a way to get him the football. So, that's my Packer take. And then on top of it, you got Aaron Jones. The question with the Packers is, can they play enough defense? Right? That's the question to me. And but their defense is opportunistic. They can rush the passer. They turn the ball over, right? Which that's the kind of style that they got to play with, because you don't want to play bend but don't break defense and give up 8 and 10 and 12 play drives, because your offense is standing over there on the sideline getting cold. You want to get the ball back, even if that means they get to score fast. You want the ball back. I worked for a guy that believed that, and I remember one time he walked down it was June Jones, and we're playing Navy, and Navy's running the triple option, and God, it's like 7-minute drives it seemed like every play was 3rd and 2, and so he walks down the sideline, goes to the defensive coordinator, he goes, "Hey, let them score, will you? If you're gonna let them, if they get 10 play, let them score. I need the ball back." I mean, that's the way those kind of guys think. So,
Jeff, I suppose ordinarily I don't think teams should ever essentially tank. I think breaking a losing habit is a really difficult thing to do. But when it comes to this Panthers team, and particularly Christian McCaffrey, he's had so many injuries this year. My own opinion is that the Panthers should just shut him down for the year and let him come back in 2021. What's your feeling on that?
It was interesting, really, this topical, Colin, because I don't know if you caught Jason Kelsey's rant about that very topic, right? And his point as a player was everything every week, regardless of record, should be about winning the next game, right? And that's how you want your players to think, okay? But the business of the business is different than that. Now, like, for example, let's talk about New England. Fellas, I think I can say this with a hand on my heart. Cam Newton's not the answer, right? Stidham's standing on the sidelines, and who am I to criticize? I'm not criticizing Bill Belichick, but I'm asking a question. Doesn't it make sense, because Stidham has not had a preseason this year, and he has very little actual game experience? Wouldn't you take these last games and play him and see what you have before you go to the draft and free agency, where you may or may not have to pick another quarterback? Same thing. I agree with you, Colin. Right now, what is the risk versus reward playing as dynamic a player who's beat up as Christian McCaffrey, right? To me, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense. And, I think there's other guys around the league that will get shut down in the next couple of weeks because of it. Because, the problem is players don't think that way. They think this week, right? Because their lives are week to week. Coaches tend to think this week because our lives are week to week. The general manager and the president and the football, the administrators, personnel guys, they've got to always have one eye on this week and one eye on what's going on in the future, right? So that's a constant dilemma. But just for them, if I was the if I was the owner of the Carolina Panthers, I'd say, I don't know if I want my biggest asset out there in games that don't matter getting beat up,
I think you say about players wanting to win no matter what the record. I think that was shown in Marcus May's reaction for the Jets against the Raiders when he was appalled by the play call by Greg Williams at the end. In terms of the last second, they should have really just, went down the field and parked up in the end zone and waited for the Hail Mary to come. But instead, he went for the blitz, and they all say it was a bizarre play. And he was disgusted in the press conference after. So you could see by him was the Jets are tanking for Lawrence. He wanted to win that game badly.
Yeah, and every coach does, because you're competitive, and we're measured. This is one of the things it's hard for people who have never done it to get your head around it. But the reality of it is, and this is not, again, this is just an observation on life, right? Everybody is in, business, you have a quarterly report, or you have your year ends, or you have, all that stuff, right? In our business, you're judged 16 times, 16 straight weeks, you're judged. And the verdict comes in at week 16. And sometimes the verdict comes in way before week 16. But it's every week. And not only are you judged, like, let's say you're working for Microsoft, right? And you're responsible for research and development. And you guys get together and you have your quarterly meetings. Well, 25 million people around the world don't turn on their television set to see Microsoft's corporate meeting or quarterly meetings, right? But every football coach has to deal with the fact, and player has to deal with the fact, that there's millions of people. It's like being in the Roman Colosseum, this or this, right? And it happens in 5 hours every Sunday. I mean, that's the life that they have. So that's why the psychology of the coaches and players is so much different. Because typically they'll fire the whole coaching staff, and the personnel guys and the GM and that will usually stay for at least one coach. Now you might, at two, they might get everybody.
Usually. Maybe it's a little bit different in Denver, but again, that's for a whole different podcast, Jeff. Mark, what's your take?
Well, I was going to say, you bring up the Roman Colosseum, Jeff, and they go in every week and they say, those of us who are about to die, we salute you, which was the famous expression I used to say. You bring up Stidham as the resident Pats fan, I suppose. I would say the only reason Belichick isn't throwing him in there is because he's designed to lose. He's got no wide receivers, really. Bird isn't the answer Edelman set out, and only one fit tight end. So that's the most generous interpretation I can apply. And I couldn't agree with you more about Christian McCaffrey. It's like he's going to do a duet with Aerosmith, and we want to make sure that Run CMC doesn't only walk this way, but in fact can still run this way.
Yeah.
But, I want to shine a light, and thinking about this game, on the person that we talked a bit about this, but the person that doesn't get the credit sometimes, and especially isn't getting the credit in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, of course, has only half the number of Super Bowl rings that Jimmy Garoppolo has. And he's gone through a long time with a few failed experiments, shall we say, in playoffs. But Matt LaFleur has come in there and is 23-6 as a rookie, as a first head coaching gig. And, for everything that, they drafted good Jordan Love, it's going to blow up in Green Bay this year. He won't fit in with Aaron Rodgers at all. He's making it work. 13-3 last year, 10-3 so far this year. Is he getting the right amount of credit for the job he's doing?
Absolutely not. And you are exactly right. And that is one of the things that we talked about on Inside the Huddle this week when we were talking about Coach of the Year guys. And I think what happens to him, frankly, is that the persona and the personality and the image and all of it that's around Aaron Rodgers really overshadows everything in Green Bay, including the head coach that's done, like you said. I don't think Vince Lombardi had that good a record at the same point in his career. And so that's a pretty good guy,
Absolutely. Just before we bounce, gentlemen, I have to get the pick for each game. So just one answer. Who's going to win? Starting with you, Jeff. Packers or Panthers?
Packers by 10.
Colin?
Oh, it's Packers all day long. We saw what the Panthers secondary was like against Drew Lock and our weapons. When you have Aaron Rodgers and Adams against them, it could be a cricket score.
In the Panthers' 4 wins this season, they've kept their opponents to 21 or less points. I don't see any situation here where they're going to be able to hold Rodgers to that kind of score. I'd expect the Packers to be in the 30s. I'd say 24-10, something along those lines.
And Mark.
If he comes off mute.
Yeah. Imagine we're in France in 1940. The Carolina Panthers have established a line of defense called the Maginot Line. And what they're faced with is a force with increased superiority on land, increased superiority in the air, better drilled, better marshaled, and overall better coached to just go round the line and ultimately invade their territory. The Packers are going to walk this game, although Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers have been better than expected this season. The Packers just have too much for them.
There's your weekly innuendo, Jeff, just in case you're wondering this happens
I
every
like
week.
that little historical reference. You can use the Maginot. You might be the only guy, Mark, that I know that could pull out the Maginot Line when you start talking about the NFL. But I like it. Hey, you know what? Think about this one, though, guys. The Panthers are 5-0 covering the spread on the road this year. 5-0. And what's the spread? 10.5?
8.5.
8.5. Now, I don't think they'll do it, but that's phenomenal. I mean, they are really. If you want to bet on an underdog, that's a dog you bet all the time.
Jeff, sorry, a quick one for you. When you go back to coaching next season, you should use the envelope trick that Colin told you about earlier on.
I am. You know what? And I am going to use it, and I'm going to give Colin the credit for it when the media finds out about it. I learned that from an Irish guy.
So when you win the championship, you can do it, John Elway, and you can say this one's for Colin.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Here, I didn't give my pick. The Panthers are 4-9. Put 4-9 together, you get 49, gentlemen. In terms of numerical data, it's too late. I have the Packers winning by 49 plus points. This could be let's look at Jeff, Neil, and Sean and have a quick just a quick swig of the beer and just turn the TV off. And I'm only joking. I'll watch it all, Jeff. Maybe the halftime, but surely I think that's actually a really good question, Jeff. If you're sitting there at 4:30 in the morning and the team is 25 points up, and you're getting really tired, but obviously your problem is you're live on TV. How do you do it?
You know what? It's funny. People ask me that too, and I'm watching football. The way I approach the whole deal is, it's just me and you, and we're watching football together, right? And listen, my wife gives me shit for this all the time, but like, we could be driving past the park, right? And there's some kids out playing football in the park. I'll pull over and watch for a minute. I don't know. It's just I'm wired that way, I guess.
Jeff, do you know on a Sunday when you're on the panel and you're in the studio, and obviously Sky have picked out their main game in terms of what's on the one channel, and then everybody else is viewing Red Zone. How do you shuffle between all the games? Do you watch Red Zone in the studio as well as the main game?
Yeah,
because really obviously you have to.
It's really kind of cool because they have one big monitor, and then there are about 3 other monitors around on the floor, and Neil sits over where he can actually see all 3 of them. Like, I can see 2. I can't see the third one. I'd have to go like that to see the third one. But Red Zone is on, or other games are on the other monitors. So really you can watch multiple games, which sometimes gets to be a little bit of a challenge because you can start to get engrossed in one game or a Red Zone, and then all of a sudden, boom, Neil asks a question. It's like, huh?
Yeah,
Mark,
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I suppose your primary focus is supposed to be on the game which Sky are showing live.
Let me tell you something. You can't, we talk about how tough it is to be a quarterback, right? And I watched Neil go from being, quote, the stat guy to taking over for Kevin. And that was really tough because, some craziness about, well, because he spoke with an English accent, he can't be sitting in the corner chair, right? Which I think is silly, but I've watched him grow in that position, and I'm gonna tell you something. I've been around a lot of broadcasters, and he does an amazing job because he's not only got to watch all the monitors, he's got people in his ear talking to him while he's talking, holding a conversation with the audience. I mean, that is not easy to do, and he does a phenomenal job and just gets better all the time. Every year I come back, he gets better.
Jeff, Mark has been messaging me for the last 6 minutes saying that he wants to ask you something. So here, Mark, here is your opportunity. This is he's going on mute.
Yeah, no, I suppose, Jeff, the only other thing I'm just curious about is like, if going back in time and everything that you've done in your coaching career so far, and I'm thinking of the coaching career and everything, is there any one job or one experience that you wished you'd done or taken along the way? Like, do you ever wish you'd, been a special teams coach in the NFL, or was there an opportunity or something that missed along the way? I'm just curious because your career was in college, in CFL so long and everything. You've done so many different things in relation to it. It's just everything you've seen and done.
Boy, that's a tough one because where I was one of the areas, and I've done a lot of dumb things and never had a plan. And I mean, people ask me that stuff, about your career and all that. I said, Mao Zedong had a 5-year plan. I didn't think 5 weeks from right now, right? I just didn't. That's not the way I was. I never negotiated a contract until, well, I'll tell you the story. I go to interview for the Raiders special teams job when Lane Kiffin got the job, and he asked me if I had an agent. I thought he was asking me a trick question. I mean, it's like, agent, what? I don't have, what do I need an agent for? And then he asked me how much I made, and I told him, and he said, you need an agent. but I never cared about any of that stuff. I just, if I had enough money to live and my family could live, I was fine, right? And I didn't think about, well, if I take this job, I can get to this job, and then this job maybe could lead to this job. I never felt that. I never did that. It was just not me. But that was probably wrong, right? Because sometimes you got to play the game. But I just didn't even really care what the game was. I just didn't know. Something I didn't do.
Get an agent.
Yeah, that's probably what. I have one now, though. It's never too late. That's one thing you can say to people. It's never too late. But I don't like. Nah, man. I've had such an amazing run and been so lucky, Mark. I'm telling you, bro. If when I was 12 years old, if you'd have told me that I would get to do this, I'd have said, man, no, man, that ain't gonna happen. No way that could ever happen. Nah, no, I can't. Nah. It's just, I've been so lucky. Everywhere I've been so fortunate. So many great people, so many great players, so many good people that looked out for me when I didn't know how to look out for myself, all of that. Coach Vermeil took me really by the ear and, drugged me around for a while. And so I'll always be very, very indebted to him. He's the best that there ever was. And, if he's not in the Hall of Fame, it's a crying shame.
No regrets. That sounds awesome. No regrets, man.
Well, at least not yet.
Jeff, you've been so incredibly generous with your time, but what you said about Kevin earlier was like, when you watch Kevin, over here in Ireland, right, we had a TV presenter, a guy named Bill O'Herlihy, and Bill presented the sports shows, and Bill was an absolute national treasure. But Kevin reminded me so much of him because they weren't the experts, but they had this incredibly warm personality, and they recognized when to bring people in, and they were both absolute gentlemen, as you said, and they got people who weren't interested in the sport or thought they couldn't be interested because maybe it was too intricate or they didn't quite understand it, and they brought it to life for them by bringing in experienced people like you and like others to talk about it, but they made it accessible. But I just wanted, like, Kevin, it was always so brilliant to watch him, and he always made it so accessible. But I think you're doing a great job of carrying on that legacy, because you've been so generous to us. Genuinely, you talked to myself and Michael earlier in the off season. You've spent time with us this evening. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, the only thing I want to ask of you guys is just let me do it again. Let's do it again. Because it's been a blast for me. I mean, it's actually been a blast for me. Like, in all of my wildest, interactions and all the people I met and talked, nobody has ever used the Maginot line in a football reference. So it's a special night.
I have to say, you're obviously saying about doing it again and stuff. I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll fly you over to Dublin for a show, because we're actually in Dublin tomorrow from the Wellshed Bar and Grill. Yeah, so we've got this big camera crew and stuff. So Jeff, if you want to miss work tomorrow and fly over with us, you're obviously more than welcome.
I tell you what, I can't make tomorrow, but I'll take you up on that, because there's a friend of mine that used to be the head coach at Trinity University, and I came over and did a thing to help him, and we opened it up for any kid that wanted to come and have practice. It was a Saturday morning. It was like 9:30 in the morning. It was about 30 degrees and it was raining. And Christ, we had kids drove from Belfast and all over the island to come for one practice. And so Ireland's got a real special place in my heart.
Jeff, do you recall the time back in 2013 when you did the show in Crow Park?
Yep.
I was at that.
Were you really?
And we had a very brief chat that night as well. We did.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that was a great night, actually. It was really good.
The convention center as well, with Jay Ajayi came down in the Super Bowl. That was
I remember that one.
Yep.
That was a big night.
I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy seeing an eagle walk out with the Super Bowl. So no.
But you know what, you guys, I tell you, the only thing I can't do Guinness. I don't know what it is. I just can't. So I'll do lager, but I can't do Guinness.
We'll make up for the Guinness, don't we?
The first round is on Mark, Jeff, obviously with all his references and stuff. Mark, yeah.
Yeah, happy to do that and everything. And it's funny, just one final point, because you're mentioning Kevin Cadle. I mean, he was near and dear to us. I mean, greatly missed by all the fans that watch Sky over the years and stuff. And you just say about the warmth of him. I keep thinking of him talking about in our ball game, which is always more a basketball term, but it was his nature. And the one thing I would think about that constantly made me laugh was, I'll never forget, there was a Thanksgiving game on, and Selena Gomez, when she was like breaking through, was like 19 or 20, was doing the halftime show of